So I think in the last couple of videos, I made it pretty obvious how excited I was about the brand new RF01 racket lineup, and that got me thinking, this is the perfect time to make a video talking about my top 5 favorite rackets right now. Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets Runners. So these ranking videos are always fun, but with top 5 bestsellers, top 5 control rackets, I always have to be a little bit objective. With my top 5 favorite rackets, it's pretty much all personal preference. I've actually been wanting to make this video for a long time now because my racket preferences have changed over the years, especially since I started reviewing, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how it affects this list. Before that though, I just want to remind you, as usual, that any of the rackets we talk about on this channel, you can check out on our website, racketsandrunners.ca. Also, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me and the store on Instagram, and let me know in the comment section what you want me to cover next. So if I had made this list 6 years ago when I first became a total racket nerd, it pretty much would have only been constant thin-beamed 1820s with really good feel. I do eventually want to make a list of my all-time favorite rackets, but I don't really know how to fit it into the content schedule here because obviously we're a retail store, so we don't carry rackets from the 90s anymore, so it wouldn't really make sense. But yeah, anyways, back then it was all about feel and that addictive factor. Now don't get me wrong, I still very much appreciate good feel, and it's the first thing I think about when I test a new frame, so it's one of the criteria that makes up my favorite rackets, but now there are a couple more. When you're testing so many rackets all the time, one of the things that instantly stands out is when a frame is clearly modeled after another one, basically when it's a sort of copycat frame. We see a lot of pure drive type rackets because it was so successful when it first came out that everyone kind of wanted to follow, and now basically everyone has their own version of it. There's nothing wrong with that, and some of those rackets are very good, but one of the things I really enjoy nowadays is finding a racket that has some sort of unique factor. Something that makes me stop and think, okay, this brand really went for it, and as long as that unique factor is beneficial to overall performance, that's a huge positive in my mind. Look at the E-Zone 100. It's a power racket like the Pure Drive, but it has unique elements like the thinner throat, like the isometric head, that make it different enough to the point I'm not just going to tell you get the Pure Drive, it's better. That's part of why I really like the E-Zone 100. It's not going to make this list for a couple of reasons, but it's a great example of a frame that has that unique factor. Another thing I really appreciate is when a racket brings something new to the table. That's different to unique, by the way. Unique can have been around for a while, like the E-Zones. Something new is when I'm testing something and I've never felt anything like it before. Whether it's technology, design, or something else, it's always cool to experience novelty, at least, again, when it's beneficial to playability. That's a big caveat, by the way. Brands are always trying to one-up each other with tech, and because of that, we've gotten a few bad ones. That I don't like, but it actually makes good tech even cooler when they actually do get it right. The Wilson Shift is a great example of a racket that brings something new to the table because it has such a unique flex that totally changes how the racket amplifies spin potential. It may not be for everyone, but objectively, that's technology that works, and I'm impressed every time I play with the Shift, so it's not going to make this top 5, but I am going to give it a glowing honorable mention. Oh, and by the way, I'm not going to put the Boom Pro on this list because part of the reason I'm making this video is because I actually want to switch away from that racket, mainly because all 5 of the rackets on this list are rackets I prefer playing with. I know I've kind of been hinting at that, but yeah, I am going to be switching rackets. These 5 are definitely going to be in the mix, but a new racket switch project is in the works for fall. Anyways, let's get into number 5. Coming in at number 5, we have a racket that may surprise some of you because I haven't talked about it that much, but it's the Babolat Pure Drive. It's funny because everyone knows about the Pure Drive. It sells incredibly well because it's the type of racket that any average player can grab and instantly play well with. But beyond that, it doesn't get much praise, and I feel like it should. I know, at least myself, I've always kind of thought, yeah, it's a Pure Drive, it's great, everyone knows that, but then I kind of gloss over it, maybe because I think it's too basic, and then I got this 30th anniversary one. This is actually my racket, not a demo, so I've been playing with it a lot over the last several months, and every time I play with it, I'm like, wow, this is a really good racket, and really a lot more well-rounded than I always thought. For one, I think feel and control are much better than it gets credit for. For a lot of people, this has always been that classic Babolat racket where traditional feel and control are cast to the side for more modern elements of power, spin, and user-friendliness. Now don't get me wrong, it feels nothing like a traditional racket, but it does provide a pretty crisp and connected feel for the ball, at least compared to a lot of the other powerful user-friendly rackets nowadays. I'm talking specifically about rackets like the Clash, the Ultra, and even the E-Zone 100 to a certain extent. Those have a lot of intrusive technology, which helps make the sweet spot big and very user-friendly, but it also makes it a bit ambiguous, and that's how you lose connection to the ball. You definitely feel some technology on the Pure Drive, that's why it's not as uncomfortable as it used to be, but there's a clear difference in the feedback when you make good versus bad contact. That feedback, combined with its inherently solid feel, gives me the confidence I need to swing as big as I would on something more control-oriented while still benefiting from its power. It's not a control racket. I don't want anyone to think that, but there's a difference between a racket that's made for control and a racket that gives you the confidence you need to feel like you're in control. That's what the Pure Drive is to me. The other obvious difference between this and a control racket is that it's light with a pretty low swing weight, and it's very playable in stock form. With a lot of more control-oriented rackets, I need them to be at least 15 grams heavier than a stock Pure Drive, and playing with a racket this light is nice because it's easier to swing it quickly. Maybe this is also me finally finding out about the beauty of lighter rackets, but I've tried with rackets like the Speed and the Blade, and I always find they need a bit more weight to boost stability, and that ends up making them harder to swing. But yeah, I'm on a big Pure Drive kick right now. I'm really excited for the next one to come out. Maybe you're all watching this thinking, yeah, Luca, we all know that the Pure Drive is a really good racket. Welcome to the party. But anyways, let's move on to number 4. Coming in at number 4, we have the Babolat Pure Aero 98. Now this racket started selling pretty well when it first came out. Then it picked up a lot in summer of 2023, and now it's one of the most popular rackets out there right now. And it's also the racket of choice for like 90% of the stringers at the store, which is kind of insane. Phil's going to say he started it, so there you go, Phil, you were first. Then Abdullah switched to one, and then Kobe played with Abdullah's racket and was like, oh, this is a pretty good racket, and he just switched to it. Me personally, I've wanted to switch to it for a while now, but there is a little something that I haven't figured out quite yet. It may just be that it's a racket that doesn't work perfectly for my game, and that's also why it's not higher up on the list. I think the reason it's so popular is also part of the reason why it didn't instantly sell so well. This is one of the most unique rackets I've ever tried. If you take a look at the shape, you can tell it has a very round hoop, and the hoop is also positioned quite high up the frame. That means the sweet spot is also higher, which benefits playability in two ways. It increases leverage over the ball in the sweet spot, so you get more power and spin when you do make good contact, and it also makes the racket more stable. Now there is one little drawback to mass higher up the frame, and this is part of the reason why I haven't fully meshed with it quite yet, but it does make the racket a bit more punishing and harder to swing. Specifically, that more punishing side is because with the point of contact farther up the racket, you're a bit less in control of it during your swing. Hopefully that makes sense. It is a bit of a tough sensation to describe. Once you do figure it out though, it's a racket that gives you tons of spin. It's also quite stiff, so it is pretty powerful, and unlike a lot of other power and spin rackets, it's a 98, so it's more precise than most. It's more of a point and shoot type of control because it is stiff with a thicker beam, but it's the smaller head size that gives it that good precision, so it's another one of these rackets that combines all three of power, spin, and control. There are a few other rackets like this. I call them player spin rackets, and they have become quite popular over the last couple of years, mainly because of all the characteristics I just talked about. I'm talking rackets like the Extreme Pro and the V-Core 98, but I do find the Aero 98 to be the most unique of the three. So it's an awesome stick that I do enjoy playing with every time I grab it, but unfortunately it doesn't work perfectly for my game, so I don't think I'll ever switch to it. Now let's move on to number 3. Coming in at number 3, we have the Yonex Percept 97. I'm going to tell you guys right now, this racket is at the top of my list for possible racket switches. There are a few things keeping me from totally committing, like the presence of some other rackets on this list, but I love the Percept 97. To me, the Percept 97 is currently the best racket that's trying to combine classic control with modern stabilization tech. This is the tech we first saw introduced in the Clash, and it's made its way into a lot of control rackets in the industry. Whenever you see something that's marketed to be more stable at a lower weight, that means it probably has stabilization tech. This tech is usually effective, no doubt about it, but especially in some of the more recent Wilson rackets, I've always found it to be a little too intrusive on feel. It essentially expands the sweet spot so that the racket is less punishing on off-center hits. In theory, that's great, but they do it by laying up the graphite in a non-traditional way, and that's what alters feel. In the Percept, this technology is called stiff racket face design, and you definitely feel it a little bit, but to me, Yonex has struck the perfect balance of easier stability while still maintaining excellent feel. You get a ton of feedback, and the sweet spot is precise enough while still being more forgiving than you would expect on a 97, and it also doesn't have vibration dampening mesh, which is a dampening technology I wasn't always a fan of on Yonex rackets. Now, do I wish these brands would stop with these stabilization techs? Absolutely not. Stabilization tech makes these rackets more playable at low weight specs, and that's very good for the average player, myself included. The problem is, feel is such an important characteristic in a control racket that you have to make sure it's still the main character, so you can use this tech, just not at too high of a cost. Brands are slowly starting to find that perfect blend, and Yonex is the farthest along in my opinion. The Percept still feels and plays like a true control racket, and I love that. Now let's move on to number 2. Coming in at number 2, we have the RF01 and the RF01 Pro. I like both pretty much equally at this point, but there are differences, and I will make a more specific RF01 video very soon. At first, I didn't want to put these rackets too high because I told myself, Luca, don't let yourself get carried away. Get over the honeymoon period first, and maybe you won't like them as much. Well, I'm not doing that. Guys, I wasn't kidding in those reviews when I said I had a smile on my face pretty much the whole time I was playtesting these. You can ask Beckett. I would not shut up about how much I liked the feel and how well I thought they played. The RF01s are special rackets in today's industry because they don't have that technology I was just talking about. And what that does is it gives them classic feel and also fantastic precision when you do make clean contact. It's not like they're completely lacking in modern elements though. They have a non-constant oval beam, which gives them a lot more power and spin than older Federer endorsed frames, and it also makes them much quicker. This creates a blend of precision, feel, power, and spin that makes them some of the best aggressive all-court rackets right now. They're so good when you decide to take the ball early, and that's a really fun play style. Now obviously I did say some similar things about the Aero 98, and I've actually gotten a lot of questions as to whether they're comparable, but beyond both being very well-rounded, they're not actually that similar. The Aero 98 accomplishes that well-rounded playability with a much heavier emphasis on spin. These have way less spin, but then way more feel and precision. They really do represent the two opposite sides of that aggressive all-court style, where these will be better if you have a flatter game, and the Aero 98's better if you have a more spinny style. If you are interested, I could make a full-on comparison in the future. Now there is a difference between the 01 Pro and the standard 01. The standard is quite a bit softer and more forgiving, but the 01 Pro is a little more precise, and I want to say it has a bit more of that magic to it. The 01 still has great feel, don't get me wrong, but I think the 01 Pro stiffer flex represents maybe a little bit better what this line is supposed to do best, and that's create a super responsive, aggressive feel. But yeah, two awesome rackets. I haven't played with them enough to say if I'll make the switch or not, but they are my favorite rackets of the year so far, and my favorite Wilson rackets in a very long time. Okay, so coming in at number 1, you probably all guessed it, the Head Gravity Pro. I know you're probably all bored of hearing this by now, but you know it had to be here, and I'll try to keep it brief. There's really nothing like the Gravity Pro because you look at the specs and it's a 100, so right off the bat you know it's going to be pretty forgiving. More forgiving than basically any mid-plus racket. That's just physics. No matter what else is going on, more real estate in the hoop means the sweet spot's going to be bigger than it would be with a smaller head. So it is quite forgiving, but it also has some of the best control, feel, precision, and stability you can get right now. Those characteristics are more comparable to traditional control rackets like the Prestige than pretty much any other retail frame right now, but you always have to remember with this racket that it's more forgiving than those. That combo should not be possible. I want to make that abundantly clear, but it is, and that's what makes it so impressive. That's why so many advanced players like it so much, and why eventually I think it's going to achieve legendary status. I'm not going to get too much into the fact that it's also quite spin friendly and powerful considering it's 100% a control racket, but keep that in mind, and that's also a byproduct of this bigger head. Now it's not the perfect racket, it is quite heavy, and this head size and shape makes it a bit more sluggish than control rackets with smaller head sizes, so you definitely can use it as an all-court frame, but there are better rackets for that. But yeah, the Gravity Pro is my favorite racket right now, and I don't think that's going to change for a while. It ticks all of the boxes for my criteria with a heavy emphasis on feel because this is one of the most classic feeling rackets you can get right now. So there you go. Those are my top 5 favorite rackets right now, and definitely 5 of the frames I'm looking at most closely when I do eventually make the switch. It's kind of cool because they are all very different. You look at number 5 and number 1 and they really couldn't be more different, but that just shows there isn't one best playability characteristic, at least not for me. But anyways, this is another super long video, so I am going to stop it there. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that if you want to demo any of the rackets we talked about today, you can come visit us in store, or if you want to buy them, you can go online at racketsandrunners.ca.